New York City has a population density of approximately 29,300 people per square mile. Real estate is at a premium. In fact, it is one of the most expensive cities to live in the United States. Despite this fact, there are two islands in the East River, less than a mile from Manhattan, that sit completely dormant. They are North and South Brother Islands. The Baby Brother, the South Brother Island, consists of only 6 acres of lush greenery. It acted as the first city dump for New York, but wealthy families living in the Bronx, a short half-mile downwind from South Island, were not pleased with this arrangement. They were able to convince the city to take their trash elsewhere, and the island was left empty. The only building ever constructed on the island was owned by Jacob Rupert. He was a brewery magnate, politician, businessman, and the owner of the New York Yankees. From 1909, when Rupert's summer home burned to the ground, until 2007, when the city reacquired the island, it changed hands many times, having numerous private owners, but never any permanent residents. This may be in part due to its big brother a short distance to the north. Unlike its baby brother, North Brother Island saw many uses over the years and witnessed the end of many lives. Up until the 1800s, the only structure on the island had been a much needed lighthouse, aiding travel along the treacherous waterways. In 1885, Riverside Hospital was built on the grounds to house people suffering from infectious disease. Given the high volume of immigrants to the nation at this time, quarantine facilities for infectious disease such as this one existed just outside many cities. These were the times of highly contagious diseases such as typhus, tuberculosis, yellow fever, and smallpox. Even once vaccines became available, those coming into the nation were unvaccinated. One of the darkest notes from this time in history is the reports that health inspectors would visit the impoverished areas of the city, round up the ill, and forcibly relocate them to North Brother Island. Having lived through COVID, I can understand the fears a pandemic could bring, and the beliefs that the greater good outweighs that of the individual. But dividing families and taking people away in the night is not an America I ever want to think about. To make matters worse, these are the peak times of the Great Melting Pot. There would be a vast language barrier. People would have no idea where their loved ones were going or why. And sadly, many of them would never recover and never return home. In 1904, New York would see the biggest disaster in its history to date. In fact, the only disaster to have a bigger death toll in New York is the falling of the Twin Towers on September 11th, 2001. On June 15th, 1904, the General Slocum burst into flames en route to Long Island. On board were almost 1,400 passengers, the majority women and children, from St. Mark's Evangelical Lutheran Church. They had chartered the boat for that day for their annual picnic. When the boat was set ablaze, Captain Van Schaik ran it ashore on North Brother Island. Patients and workers at the island, along with the crews of 2 tugboats that had arrived quickly after, did their best to save as many lives as they could. In total, there were 431 survivors, but 1,021 perished that day. 1904 also brought North Brother Island its most famous resident, Mary Mallon, also known as Typhoid Mary. She was among those forcibly incarcerated because she was an asymptomatic carrier working in the food industry. Her first stay at Riverside Hospital only lasted 3 years. She was released with the promise not to serve large groups of people food. She must have had her fingers crossed when she agreed to this, because she was found a short time later working in a hospital cafeteria. She was brought back to the island, where she lived the remainder of her days. The island continued in its capacity as a quarantine facility until 1941. Vaccinations and improved healthcare were seeing less need for such spaces. Also, immigration slowed, and with World War II in full swing, doctors and nurses were needed elsewhere. The doors didn't stay closed long, however. At the end of the war, In 1945, soldiers were coming home in large numbers and they needed a place to live. That's when the island reopened with a new purpose. This was a short lived, however, as housing equalized and new places were built. Fewer and fewer people were calling North Island home. The final chapter in the island's life with people occurred in the 1950s and 60s. Riverside was once again reborn, this time as Paradise, a rehab facility for drug addicted teens. It didn't go so well. The detox method of choice was usually just to lock them in a room and wait it out. The staff was corrupt, and the facility was said to be full of drugs and sex workers. Despite the number of suggested uses in the decades that followed the closing of the rehab facility in 1965, from housing to casino to adult rehab center, nothing else ever came of the island. The forests begun to reclaim the land, birds laid their nests, and nature took over. Today, it is a protected bird sanctuary. It should come as no surprise, given the island's past, that it is also a hotspot of paranormal activity. People say that they can hear whispers and screams, see glowing orbs, and have seen people wandering the grounds in the hospital gowns, only to disappear into the night.